Coming up, a Zuni program aims to bring generations together through agriculture. Plus, we talk about prisons with an organization which exposes the harms of mass incarceration. And we learn about the Two Moon and Back Tour from two Indigenous rappers. We have those interviews plus headlines coming up on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. We start today in Arizona, where a tribe is constructing the world's first solar over canal. Gila River Indian Community is taking this innovative step to combat the ongoing drought in the Southwest. The tribe and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers signed an agreement in Sacaton recently for the Irrigation Renewable Energy Pilot Project. The project is expected to be completed in 2025, and Phase 1 will begin with an Interstate 10 section of canal being covered by solar panels. The project expects to save about 200 acre-feet of water a year by reducing evaporative water loss and saving the water to generate power. The project is expected to generate 1 megawatt of renewable energy, creating a new benefit for tribal farmers. We turn now to the Midwest, where we find a couple of scholars putting the Landback movement on the map, literally. Two University of Kansas professors have launched an online map and database tracking where private landowners have returned property to Indigenous communities. Stuart Huntington has more.
The Landback movement has a growing presence in the public square and on social media. But how can you quantify what you see in your feed? Sarah Deere and Ward Lyles from the University of Kansas have set out to try to answer that. They've launched a project that lists and maps publicly available reports of land returns.
It's primarily right now to educate, to give people a sense of what's happening, perhaps inspire other landowners who live on stolen land to be inspired by that and consider themselves where their land is and who it originally belonged to.
They've identified 90 instances of land return, though they're careful to be respectful. Not every Indigenous community wishes to publicize a return. But one thing is inescapable. This movement is booming.
One of the most striking things is the growth. The growth in instances. As scholars, when you go back through data, you know that there's likely to be a recency bias. It's easier to find things that are more recent than things that are much older. But if you go back and scour pretty closely, as we've tried to do, we can have high confidence in saying that this movement is growing tremendously. Like orders of magnitude, going from a few instances in a decade to instances every week.
The site is new, and the scholars say it will evolve as they get feedback. Reporting from Carbondale, Colorado, Stuart Huntington, ICT News.
Staying in Kansas, the RV Haterline Elementary School has a policy in place that forced an 8-year-old Wyandotte student to cut his hair. The American Civil Liberties Union of Kansas wrote a letter to the Girard Unified School District to rescind its policy that requires boys to wear their hair short. They said refusing to accommodate the student's religious and cultural beliefs violates state and federal law. The boy, whose identity was anonymous in the letter, was inspired to grow his hair after attending a Wyandotte youth event over the summer. In September, the boy's mother received an email from the school's assistant principal that said the boy was required to cut his hair by the following week or he would be sent home. The school district superintendent said the policy will be reviewed in December. Most of the iconic stories from the sports world are about mascots, or What is an appropriate representation of Indigenous cultures? Now a twist involving a controversy from a Dakota-inspired helmet. Marc-Andre Fleury wore a custom mask for the Minnesota Wild's Native American Native Heritage Night after being told by the NHL that it was not allowed. Fleury warmed up for the game against the Colorado Avalanche by wearing the specifically designed mask. This all started when the league banned players from wearing specialty jerseys, masks, stickers, decals, or tape for theme nights. However, when the Wild celebrated Native American Heritage Night against Colorado, Fleury wanted to honor his wife, Veronique, an Indigenous woman with a specifically designed mask. The team posted this clip on Instagram.
My name is Cole Red Horse Taylor. I am from the Prairie Island Indian community, and I am from the Mdewakanton band of Dakota, which are the dwellers of the sacred lake. So I was asked to design a helmet for Fleury. You know, they wanted stuff that really represents like Dakota, you know, culture, Dakota aesthetics, kind of emulate our environment, the flora of our area, of our homelands. They talk about our relationship to the earth. It's just always so innate for me to design things like that, and it also, you know, was coincidental because, you know, Fleury, he's called the flower, and I just thought that'd be really cool. And I knew right away when I was asked to do this that I knew how I wanted it to look and how I wanted it to be laid out. And then the language part was really, really important for me to have Dakota language, which is the first language of this area of St. Paul of Minnesota.
Oh, nice.
And they're all floral designs.
Yeah, flower.
Yep.
Sorry.
That wasn't intentional either. I would have done it either way. But then they're like, oh, he's called the flower. I said, okay.
Oh, that's beautiful, beautiful. I think, you know, not many players can have something to represent themselves a bit out there, right? So as goalie, we're lucky to be able to try to have a little bit of fashion, but try to represent ourselves, you know, what we like, what we believe, you know. So obviously this is a very nice piece of work. Yeah.
Fleury is a three-time Stanley Cup champion. He won the Vezina Trophy in 2021 as the league's top goaltender. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. A community steeped in agriculture for generations is being acknowledged for its work. Zuni Youth Enrichment Project has been awarded a Culture of Health Prize. ICT's Dalton Walker spoke with board member Joe Clonch, and Shirley Snavy has this interview.
Something that's really neat about Zuni, or something that's really important about Zuni, is that every song, every prayer, every ceremony really includes agriculture at its core, and it includes bringing the moisture that's going to be needed in order to support the agriculture for the benefit of the community. Because we're able to reach the kids in school and then also support that work that's happening at home, it becomes more of a holistic approach to teaching about nutrition, to teaching about relationship to land, to teach about practicing, you know, one's culture and what that looks like, even in 2023.
The pandemic changed us. For the Pueblo of Zuni, it brought back the tradition of gardening.
We always struggled with our community garden program. Like, we just didn't, unless we were busing kids to our gardens, people were not participating. And then we were seeing gardens everywhere throughout the community during COVID. And we started to reflect as a program. And if you look back at old photos of Zuni, it's an agricultural based community. If you look back at the old photos, the farming that was done by families adjacent to the river, connected to the river that comes through Zuni. That river has dried. It's been dammed upstream. And so you don't see those gardens in the same way that you did, like in those historical photos. But still, it was a family activity. And what we were forced to do because of the pandemic was meet families where they were at. And in doing so, we were able to tie back into the traditional way that farming was done in Zuni. The Zunis have their own specific method for gardening that is unique to them, to their community. It's called traditional waffle gardening. So if you look at the plots, they resemble a waffle, and that was a way to keep the moisture in, and help support the plant. And corn is really big, and a traditional crop that families were planting, squash, and pumpkins, and a lot of carrots and cilantro. So it was a good mix of the traditional foods that had always been grown there, and then also, some more recent crops. What we were hearing from parents is, my kid really wants to plant a garden this year, so we're going to plant a garden. And the youth were really the source, and where the momentum came from to plant. And once things got rolling, it became like just a really important family activity, something that people were able to do while they were at home. And we were also really interested in how many different members of families were involved in the process of planting per family, and it was on average four members of the family. And so that's, the children, that's the parents, sometimes that's a grandma or grandpa. And that was really encouraging to see, just intergenerational relationships that were taking hold as a result of being able to come together to grow food. This has been a core part of how we do our food sovereignty programming now. So every year we are distributing garden kits, and we're distributing rain harvest kits. And the really neat thing is we're in the schools serving the youth directly, helping with their school gardens. And so they're getting that education at school. And then we're providing these resources for families. So many of these kids are able to go home and continue what they learned at school at home with their families. And within their families, they're able to take that to a whole deeper level. Pandemic made visible how vulnerable the Zuni community was to the food supply chain. Zuni exists in a food desert, and I guess the irony is, just a few generations ago, Zuni was a self-sustaining, agricultural-based community, and that knowledge still exists. And what we're trying to do is work with local cultural bearers, local farmers, to ensure that those traditions continue to be brought forward.
The Prison Policy Initiative is a nonprofit organization that produces cutting-edge research to expose the broader harm of mass incarceration. ICT's Daniel Herrera sat down with PPI spokesperson Wanda Bertram to talk about Native American incarceration rates. Take a look.
Wanda, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So can you just give us an overview of Prison Policy Initiative?
Sure. Our organization has existed for about 20 years, and what we do is we provide data and charts illuminating the harm of mass incarceration nationally, and not just the harm done to people who are behind bars, which are about 2 million people right now in prisons and jails, but also the harm done to their families and their communities, their children, and society overall. What society, the societal effects of putting as many people behind bars as this country does.
Can you give us an overview or just some general statistics of Native American incarceration rates in the U.S.?
Absolutely. Native people, unfortunately, have much higher incarceration rates than white people. And while I think most people think of mass incarceration as something that primarily affects Black people, and that's true, Native people are almost as overrepresented as Black people, and in some places more, right? So if you look at, in particular, states like Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Alaska, Minnesota, these are states with, larger Native American populations and extreme discrepancies. In Alaska, for example, Native American people make up 14% of the state population and 40% of the prison population. So overall, the incarceration rate of Native people is, I think, more than 4 times higher than the state and federal prison incarceration rate of white people. And I mean, that's really the million-dollar question, because unfortunately we don't have enough detailed data about the incarceration of Native people to really answer the why. One of the things that we're always trying as an organization to bring to light is just how little data is collected about incarceration, particularly minority communities' incarceration rates, given how big of an issue it is, right? We don't collect data on crime and incarceration. Well, maybe on crime, but not on incarceration, the way that we do around employment, right? Labor, issues like that. And so again, the why is hard to pin down, but I will say that we have a criminal justice system that overwhelmingly targets the poor. The average income of people who are in prison is, under $20,000 a year prior to their incarceration. When you go into the criminal justice system, if you're poor, you're worse off. You have to count on the availability of a public defender. You're saddled immediately with all kinds of fines and fees that you may not be able to pay off, which sets you back in your ability to set up a defense. You're likely going to be incarcerated pre-trial and held on bail, which if you're low income, you're not going to be able to afford. And then after, if you are convicted, incarceration is going to it's going to have a much more drastic impact on your life afterwards, if you didn't have that much to start out with, because it's going to saddle you with the stigma of a criminal record, and it's going to be that much harder for you to get a job, turn things around when you're released, and that in turn makes people more likely to go back to prison, right? So poverty and incarceration are deeply intertwined, and as I'm sure your viewers know, Native people are much poorer on average than white people. And I think that accounts for a lot of the disparity. One of the things that distinguishes Native incarcerated populations from white incarcerated populations, or really anyone else, is that Native people are sometimes locked up in U.S. prisons and jails, depending on where they commit the crime or how they're sentenced or convicted. And sometimes they're locked up in Indian country jails. That's the technical term for them. So these are jails that are built on tribal land and managed by tribal officials. Like all jails, tribal jails or Indian country jails hold mostly people who are being detained pre-trial. So these are people who, it's anything from you have a serious charge against you and you're awaiting trial for weeks or months, or you may the police may have picked you up and took you to jail, and there may be some minor charge against you like disturbing the peace, but it could just be what people in the system sometimes call a quick stay, so a stay of just a few days. The important thing about jails to know is that they're often, in addition to holding people for serious charges, used to hold people simply because they're a kind of public order problem. Maybe they were having a mental health crisis and they were acting out on the street. Maybe they were they're dangerously drunk or on drugs or overdosing, right? In any case, what we've noticed across the country is that in places with that have focused on building new jail space, you're seeing jail used by default as a solution to things like mental health crisis and overdose crises, right? If you don't have anywhere else to put people who are suffering like that, who are causing a disturbance, you're going to put them in jail. And why I say that is because we have data showing that in Indian country areas, there's been a huge jail building boom over the last 20 years. I think the number of jails on tribal lands has risen about 25% since 2000. And that's important because when you invest in jail space, you're going to jail more people. One of the things that I think is really important to do right now is to talk about how we are already punishing people, particularly for nonviolent acts, given that there are, where we are seeing, things like the fentanyl crisis go on, and we're wondering how to deal with that. You have things going on like, people who are facing addiction issues, people suffering from addictions to drugs, maybe, people turning to dealing drugs in their communities. And we need to ask ourselves, is this something that we want to respond to with punishment, or is it something that we want to respond to with increased health care, right? Or expanding access to housing, medical care, that sort of thing. And when we look at the amount that we're already locking people up, that's what I think is important to look at. When we see we already have, the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Even during the pandemic, when incarceration rates here are pretty low, we still had the highest incarceration rate in the world. And so it's not like incarceration on a mass level is really solving the problems that we're encountering in our communities. And I think that's the conversation we need to have.
Well, Wanda Bertram, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Popular Indigenous rappers Matu Wahui and Shoot Kazal performed in Phoenix as part of their To Moon and Back tour. IC's Demi Dupivian spoke with them before the show.
Mato Wayuhi was fresh out of his last season composing for the hit show Reservation Dogs. Shuteskat had just finished a few campaigns and was gearing up to release new songs. They had always dreamt of collaborating on something together, and the timing just felt right. The To the Moon and Back tour celebrates both the musical journey of each artist and the unification of Native communities.
It was just to create that intention of getting back to seeing our people all together. The pandemic stifled so much creative energy, so to get to open up these like beautiful little portals in all these cities all over the place felt really good. And bit by bit, I think the intention is there for us to hold our privilege, to hold our platforms, to hold our community really closely with us as we do these things.
Their hip-hop performance in Phoenix was the halfway point of the first leg of the tour. They planned a total of 8 shows in 8 big cities across America.
I am here with DA. He is a member of the band. DA, can you tell us what you're doing tonight and how the tour has been?
All right, so I'm performing guitar for Mato Wayuhi. I play like all the lead guitar stuff, a little bit of rhythm. Yeah, we're gonna play a really good show tonight. I'm really excited for Phoenix. Like a lot of friends here might show up, and it's always good to see familiar faces. Makes me a little bit more comfortable on stage.
Mato Wayuhi says he's grateful to be able to experience this journey with his closest friends. He identifies as two-spirited and hopes to inspire young people to be their most authentic selves.
Growing up, I knew who I was, and I knew that music could be an outlet for that, in terms of just expressing my identity, both racially and sexually and culturally and everything like that. And I didn't want anyone to feel how I felt growing up, ostracized and like marginalized and kind of like afraid to be themselves. And so specifically like in the last year, just with my music videos and stuff like that, I was like, I'm not afraid anymore. It's like I don't have anything to hide, and it's good. It should be celebratory, and I think it's a privilege to be able to do it. And so I want to do it in a way that's respectful and also like true, and just like potentially flawed and just beautiful and messy and poetic and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I want kids to feel good about being themselves.
Their last show from this part of the tour will be in New York on November 18th and resumed again mid-December in California.
We're learning a lot from it as to how we want to kind of hold our careers going forward and how we want to hold the space that we take up as artists.
Phoenix! Phoenix!
In Phoenix, reporting for ICT News, I'm Demi Jupavio.
ICT invites you to be part of something special. Each week we're taking on a different topic important to Indigenous people and you, our viewers and readers. Find the link at ictnews.org to sign up for the e-weekly newsletter. It's emailed on Thursdays. We're covering food, business, economic development, arts, and culture. And for December, we're working on a very special holiday edition on the web at ictnews.org. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.